G'day, Jinx here, and welcome to my latest DoomTools tutorial. This time I'm going to be talking about integrating DoomTools with Ultimate Doom Builder. And this is a new technique which is different to the one in my original DoomTools tutorial that I only just learnt, and it is a billion times better and frankly the correct way to do it. Well, when I say new technique, I really mean new to me. It's actually always been this way. It really blew my mind when I learned how to do this. It makes it so much better. So let's get into it and see how it works. Basically, first thing you need is a DoomTools project. So I'm going to make this with the GUI, but you can make it with the command line, which is how I usually do it. So I'm going to do a WAD. I'm going to pick a folder for it. Then what I like to do when I do DoomTools is I just like to enable everything. And then once everything's enabled, I can choose what I'm going to use or not. So if you make a project and you don't have the map stir, you've got to manually add the map stir. So if I just enable it with everything, then the project is able to be used for anything. So I'm going to set maps and assets. I'm going to have DecoHack turned on. And for textures, I'm going to go project itself and boom extensions. And I'm going to leave the other two blank. Okay, I'm just going to make a name for it. I'm going to call it DoomTools Tutorial UBD Integration. Browse to my Doom2 WAD for the iWAD and select DSD hacked for the actual hack. And then I'm just going to go open folder, and then I'm just going to hold down shift and right click and select open PowerShell here. And I can just type in DoomMake just to see that it's all working, and it is. Now, this is our folder. I'm just going to go to my Doom folder on my server and go into texture pack. Now, if you go into the source folder of your DoomTools project, there's a folder called WADs and a folder called textures. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy in, let's just copy in a bunch of these. Jimmy text and Zoom text, put in O text, and why don't we put in the mid texture archive? That's a fantastic one. What I'm trying to get at here is you can go crazy with this method. You probably wouldn't want to use all these at once because it's just too much choice. It'll actually slow down your mapping. Actually, let's also copy in the Doom World resource archive. So basically, there's a guy on the forums who is collecting all the textures from the share your texture thread and putting it into a usable texture WAD for you. It's fantastic. Now that we've actually got them in our folder, the first thing to do is to come to the credits file inside your DoomTools project and appropriately credit these WADs. Okay, so now I've just made a very, very simple credit list of those textures. It's just important to do, I think, for the health of the community. And also now that it's done, I don't have to worry about it. And even if I do forget about it, which I won't because it needs more detail, at least something's there. Now let's load up Doom Builder. I'm going to start a new map. And here where it says add resources, I'm just going to add all those resources that we're going to be using. So I come into the root of my DoomTools project. I go to source, I go to WADs, I go to textures, and these are all my WADs I'm going to be using. And let's just do them one by one. So you click on it and then make sure you click this button that says exclude the resource from testing parameters. And just do that for everything. So what this is doing, this is adding the resource as a resource file, but it's not going to actually try and use the resources when you're running Doom itself. And the reason for that is to do with how the texture one map lump works. Basically, it's not additive. So whatever's the last texture pack you load is going to overwrite all the previous ones. So by loading them up and we're just excluding them. And then we're going to go add resource again. And this time we're going to open up and go to our DoomTools project, but instead of going into source, we're going to go into build. Remember we ran the build command right at the beginning, and we're going to select our entire WAD DT tutorial UB integration. There are other options you can choose here, like you could choose textures.wad or maptext.wad even. But I like to use the actual release WAD because it has everything in it, including assets like sprites and your DHack stuff if you've got DHack going on. And it's already built when everything else is built, so I just use the release WAD. Go open, and this time we're going to leave the exclude resource parameter testing thing on. Bam. That means that, so that one, if we double click on it just to check again, is the last one in the list, and it also has the exclude tick box unchecked. Everything else is behind it and has the exclude tick box checked. You're just going to go OK. Take a while to load because there's so many WADs in this example I'm doing because I'm going crazy just to demonstrate you the power. Okay, so when you're loading up texture WADs from the internet, sometimes they're going to have errors in them. Nobody's perfect. So in this example, the DoomWorld thread and the Zune texture thread has a couple of duplicate lumps. It'll still work perfectly fine. As long as you're not using those exact textures, it's not actually going to make any difference. And you can instruct Ultimate Doom Builder to stop notifying you if you wish. But in the case of these files, they're just a couple of duplicate texture names. It's really easy to fix. I'm not going to go into how to fix it, but I'm just going to copy over my adjusted versions of the WADs just so I don't have those errors anymore. Anyway, so now we've loaded it up. We're going to go File, Save Map As. We're going to go into our source projects, into Maps, and we're just going to call it Map01, like so. Now I'm just going to draw a box and put a player in it. And here's the thing. If I hit the play button, we're going to get all these weird errors and it's going to look all bollocksy. But if I actually go into my selecting for textures, you can see I've got 32, I've got Jimmy text, I've got mid textures, I've got O-text, and I've got this ginormous copy from the thread. And I've got Zune text. So I've got all the textures available to use, just a ridiculous amount of them, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to draw a bunch of boxes in this room and extrude them up off the floor and then apply a texture to all the walls of those boxes. And each box is going to take a texture from a different texture WAD. So they're going to be all coming from different sources and none of them from the Doom 2 original iWAD. Okay, so that's what we've got. But if I save this and I do a play, it's going to be all bollocksed up. So here's the trick. Now remember, in my DoomTools folder, this is the DoomTools root directory that we were in. Okay, so if I just type DoomMake --help, we get a list of the help, and one of them is called auto-build-verbose. So we're just going to copy that and go DoomMake blam auto-build-verbose, and that's going to do a build. And then what it's going to do is anytime it detects any changes, as long as this window here, this PowerShell is not closed, or command prompt, or however you do it, you can actually run this command from a tick box in the GUI as well. But any changes I make to the project will automatically be built. So it's done the build, and if I now load up, so if I go to Slade and I load up the tutorial project and load it in, you can see that it has actually added the textures that I've applied, and it's only added those textures, nothing else, just the textures I've applied. Okay, and because in our map options, right, we've got all the texture WADs loaded, but the only one being loaded as part of the load order when it's being sent to the source port is that map file. Now if I do a preview, it comes out and we can see all the textures that we have. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here and I'm going to turn off, by going Control+C, I'm just going to turn off the automatic monitoring. So now that we've got that all done, right, if I just make this a little bigger, if I make another box here, this time I'll use a flat for the floor. Let's use an O-text flat, and I'll make another box here. I'll make another flat for the floor. I'll use a DoomWorld thread flat. I really like these sort of skin-shaped sigils. And again, we'll just select some random texture. Let's do another Jimmy text. Now, if I press the play button, we're not going to be able to see those textures because DoomTools hasn't rebuilt the actual WAD that we're using to extract the textures from our resource files and placing them into our release WAD, the one that's actually being loaded with Doom. That's why they're showing as blank. If I save it and press the play button, then nothing has changed, because even though it's saved this time and it's not loading from the actual Ultimate Doom Builder temp map, DoomTools still hasn't reconstructed the actual WAD that we're loading that will have the textures placed in it. So what happens is DoomTools needs to build the map every time you save, and that's why we have that monitoring thing. So let me just turn the monitoring on again by going DoomMake auto-build-verbose. It's done the build, and now I go play. You can see it's working. But because I've got auto build on, if I now make a sector here and I'll go to Zone Flats and I choose Blue Rocks. If I just open up the actual window so you can see both at once. Oops. Now if I hit save, it's going to automatically build. So save, so it automatically builds. And then I can hit play. And you can see it's all working. And that is the new functionality. Well, it's not new. This is the way it's supposed to be done. I only just found out about it. So there's actually a bit more that we can do with this. What if you are playing a WAD and it hasn't got a texture map pack released? Oh, that's a tongue twister. But they use a particular set of textures or, flats or whatever that you really, really like and would like to use in your WAD. So what do? There is no publicly available resource pack. So, like you could rip out the particular images you want and, build your own pack, which is what basically I do. But you can actually utilize this same method to automate all that stuff exactly like we just did with officially released resource WADs. So what I'm going to do here, this is Neon Overdrive. This is the WAD for Neon Overdrive, which is from Astral Fiend. First thing you want to do, of course, is always check the text file and make sure the copyright permissions say that you're allowed to use the material in the WAD, and in this case, you are. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to copy that into the same folder with all the other texture WADs. So now in Ultimate Doom Builder, I'm going to go Edit, Map Options, and I'm going to add that as a resource, just like we did before. So I'm coming down to Source, WADs, Textures, and I'm adding Neon Overdrive itself as a resource. Now again, I want to click the exclude this resource from testing parameters, but what's important is I also want to click this button here that says strictly load patches between pstart and pend. Now, sometimes you won't want to do this, but if it's a modern WAD, you probably do. And what that's going to do is it's going to limit what's being loaded from the WAD. And this is because if it's a full WAD, it's going to have map data in it, sounds, asset data, sprites, all sorts of weird stuff that are not applicable to this task. So clicking this button will just make it load just the patches and the flats, as well as the associated texture lump and everything. If you click this and it doesn't work, then do it without it, but it's better to use it with it on if you can. So let's try it with it on first. And once again, I'm just going to drag this up one, just so the last thing in the load order here is our built WAD from DoomTools. I'm going to hit OK. And now I'm going to draw another box, come in here, raise this up, and let's grab all that, grab all those walls, go to the lower texture. And now we have Neon Overdrive itself, and all the textures inside Neon Overdrive are available to us to use as we like. Remember, you've got to make sure they've got the permission to use them, which we do in this case. So I've got these beautiful little things here. So why don't we do this thing? We'll grab this, we'll stick it as a mid texture, and we'll just chuck it down like that. Now I'm not going to make it all fancy. The point is it works. And again, if we, without saving, if we press play, we're not going to see anything. With saving, and we press play, we're not going to see anything. But if I go back to my command prompt and I just put on the auto build and we do a build and then I press play, it's now working. Okay, that mid texture is now working. I can come over here, do this. How long was this texture? This texture is 128 long. So I'll just grab that, 128. And now we've got our texture. Grab this, make this 128. Then we'll just grab a different one for each side, just for fun. And remember, if I do play, this is still showing up in the WAD because it's been extracted and added to our final project. But all the other textures we just added, they haven't been. They still need to have the actual project built to extract them from Neon Overdrive and place them in our release WAD. So remember, if I load up the actual box here, set this up so we can see both at once, and I now hit the save button, you can see it automatically does a build. And now when I play, you can see that all the different mid textures have been applied. Okay. But remember, you only need to do the rebuilding when you're adding new textures. Okay. So I could, I can make another room. I could even give the floors a new texture, and I'll take it from the base Doom WAD. So how about this one? And without saving it, I can just still do a preview. And that's all going to actually be translated through. And the reason why that's being translated through is because we only need to do a rebuild when we're adding new textures. Because what is actually happening, I'll just save this. If we go to our folder, we go into the build folder. This is the file that's being built by that automatic build. So if we open this up in Slade, you can see that it's extracted from the WADs that we had all the individual textures that we are using, all the patches and all the individual flats. Okay, so they've just been added in. And remember, we set Ultimate Doom Builder to exclude all those other resource WADs from our load order. So what's happening on the Ultimate Doom Builder side is that it's loading up the Doom 2 iWAD, then it's loading up our release file, which is the one that's open in Slade now, that has all the textures that we've used from our resource WADs. And then on the end of it, it's loading up the temp file for the map that we're currently working on. So when you hit play without saving, it just loads up a temp version of the map. So the upshot of all that is that if you're not adding new textures to your project, as in even if they're coming from resource WADs, if they've already been added to your release WAD, then you don't need to even do saves. You can just do normal previews and it will still work. You only need to do the save and the auto rebuild if you're adding brand new textures from your project folders or from your resource WADs. Meaning you can just use a normal instant preview. And that is still how you'd be doing most of your previewing, because, once you get into your mapping, you'll find that there's a coherence by having similar textures throughout the area of the level that you're in. And remember, DoomTools isn't additive. It keeps a record of everything, like a hash record of everything that's happening in your project. So when you do a build, the first build might take forever, especially if it's a really large project. But as you are working on it, it's only going to make changes and do builds when you have made physical changes to the file structure, which can really speed things up. Let's just get rid of this flat. Let's find a flat from here. How about, now you'll note that the colors are a little squiffy. That is because there is actually a PlayPal inside Neon Overdrive. So if I load up at Neon Overdrive, it has its own custom PlayPal, right? So there's lots of ways I can get around this. I could just delete this PlayPal out of my original one, or another good thing that you could do is go into your DoomTools project. I'll just turn off auto build for now. And I'll go a DoomMake -- targets. There we are. I'm going to go rebuild palettes. And then I'm just going to type that in. And that's going to extract the color map and the PlayPal from the original Doom and place it in our folder structure. So if I come down into my source folder, I come down into convert, color map, we've got the color map, and palettes, we've got the Doom palette. Now in our particular demo, we're actually going to be using the Doom 2 palette. So we don't really want to have the color maps and the palettes embedded in our release WAD. I mean, you can if you want, but we don't really want that. All we want is for Ultimate Doom Builder to show the correct palette when we're looking at our flats and looking, at the textures and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a DoomMake. And that's going to recreate the WAD using those palettes. And then in Slate, I'm going to load up our file. And you can see now we have the palette and the color map inserted. We're just going to grab these. We're going to copy them. We're going to go new WAD, paste them in. And then I'm going to save this as, I'm going to save it outside of my projector. I'm just going to call this DoomPal.wad. And what we've done now is just made a simple WAD that has the correct palette information. So now I'm going to go back into palette, delete, color maps, delete. And just to make sure it's all working exactly as I think it is, I'm just going to do a clean and do another DoomMake to rebuild the WAD. So I've loaded up Ultimate Doom Builder and I've loaded up our map, and you can see that if I click on, say, the base Doom textures, you can see they've got all this purpley looking color. That's because they're using the palette from Neon Overdrive. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Edit Map Options. I'm going to go Add Resource, click on the thing, and I'm going to load up that palette WAD that we just made. I'm going to stick it at the very end, so it's after our own resource WAD. And just make sure this is excluded, because in this case we don't want to use this WAD. We just want it to instruct Ultimate Doom Builder what palette to use. And if you're going to be using your own custom palettes and stuff, they're going to be embedded into the release WAD anyway, so you don't need to do any of this. This is just for when you're using resource textures that have custom palettes, like say Neon Overdrive in this case. But your resulting release WAD is going to be working on the traditional original Doom palette. Okay, it's going to do a load. And now if I go to the Doom textures, they now look correct, because the last object loaded in the Doom load, it's going to have the Doom palette. And now DoomTools is looking correct, even though we have a texture archive that has its own palette. Anyway, so let's go to, say, a Neon Overdrive flats, and let's find a flat. How about this weird looking grate? Actually, let's make all these flats into something a little less hard on the eyes. How about this one from Neon Overdrive? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a 64 by 64 box. Helps if I actually draw it. And this time I'm going to select that, and let's get it from, how about the OTEX patches? Where's a nice one? How about one of these teleporters? Now in MBF 21, you can't align flats. I mean, you can, there's a tricky way you can do it by using scrolling floors and stuff like that, but it's a pain. It's far easier to do actual editing. So if I actually increase the grid to 32 and I move this sector up, you'll find that a lot of, sometimes when you're doing your flats, they're coming out all weird. It's because the flats are absolute. You can see as I move it around, you can see where it's being shown on the actual Doom grid. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this, and I'm going to do a quick little edit of this flat, is just to demonstrate two things. One is how to make adjustments to textures you get from your resource WADs. Like say they've got a really cool slime texture, but you know, you'd prefer it to be blood. This is kind of how you do it. And also how to integrate into the same sort of setup that we're using with the resource WADs, your own custom DoomTools textures that you've created yourself that have got nothing to do with external resource WADs. So let's just flick this over here. I'm going to save this and then I'm going to do a DoomMake. And in Slade, let's open up the WAD that it's created. Okay. And if we come down into our flats, you'll find that we have the flat that we have saved. I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to go to graphic, export as PNG, and I'm going to export this into my source, convert flats. And I'm just going to call this, make sure it's got 8 characters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so we've got to get rid of one. So I'll just get rid of that. And I'll just put, say, A5. That's how I do it for alignment 5. So it's basically the same name. So it'll show up in the same order. And then I just load up my favorite application for editing. In my case, I'm going to use Affinity. Let's load up that flat. And all I need to do now is make sure I'm in pixel mode, go to filters, distort, affine. We have this little dialog here, and we're just going to make this 50 and 50. And all I've done is I've created the flat offset for this image. Now I can just save this. And now if we go into our flats folder and load that up, you can see we have a new image. Okay, so again, I'm going to do a DoomMake to do a build. And what you'll find is that if I go into the WAD that we're creating, because we haven't actually used that flat, it's just that open folder structure is just like the WADs. It only adds the flats we've physically used into this file. Okay, so it's still using this one here. But what it does do is if we go into our build folder, part of the build process creates a WAD called textures.wad. And if I open this, you can see in the textures WAD, there is now that file that we just created from our source. So what DoomTools has actually done here is created your own resource file, just like those other ones you stuck in the WADs right back at the beginning of this video, but using all your own custom textures that you have loosely placed inside your convert folder or however you've done it. They all go into this texture WAD, which becomes a resource WAD, which then you can load in Ultimate Doom Builder, just like the other WADs that we talked about today. Now when we go to Doom Builder, I can add that texture WAD from our builder, like so. And again, exclude it because we're just using it exactly the same way we're using a normal build, a normal WAD, just like those other ones. And I'm going to drag it up one. So the last thing in the load order is our actual project file and hit OK. And now let's go to this flat. We'll right click on it. We'll just click on there and you'll see we now have textures. There's one flat in it because that's all we've done. And there it is. We just whack that in, click OK. And you can see because of the adjustment we did, that is now aligned perfectly. So again, we can just turn on the auto rebuild. We hit a save and you can see it automatically builds. Do a play. And you can see that there's our texture. So that is a texture that's coming from our open directory DoomTools project, not from the original WADs that we've added. Let's say we do like that. So now I could go in here and I could add that to all these guys here. And we'll just bring that down one, down two. So this little flat up the top is using our custom flat that we made, but because it's aligned, even though it's off kilter, it's coming out fine. But because we actually haven't added any new graphics, just a normal play will work. It doesn't even need to do a rebuild. And you can see it's all working in here as well. And that is basically the new methodology. So if I just go back into here, select the sector, let's select this one first. I'll just copy out that so I can find it again easy enough. I go into OTEX, I think it came from, just paste that in. This is why I use a modified version of the same file name and add them. You can see how my version is offset to everything else because of what we did to it. Now remember, because we saved this and did the auto build after we removed that texture, it was removed from our WAD. So we need to do another save to make sure it is auto built. And then we can do a play. And you can see how the offset texture actually works. But the real point I'm trying to get here is that when you're building your own textures, no matter how you choose to do it, the resulting textures.wad is actually a texture resource WAD, just like all your other WADs. Now there's one more caveat that you need to keep in mind that we'll just quickly go over and then we're done. And that is when you are ripping WAD data out of these texture WADs, it's raw data. There's no re-palettising going on. What that means is if I actually load up our release WAD and I load up Neon Overdrive, let me try and find an example. We've got these files called graph for the graffiti from Neon Overdrive. So let's have a look at a purplish one. Here's a purplish one. Do we have that one in our... So in Neon Overdrive, see how it's got purple colors here? But in our WAD, it's got blue. And that is because Neon Overdrive has its own palette, which is changing it. You know how you change the way the palettes work. I'm not going to go into how palettes work, but basically the pixels in this image are index colored. So the index numbers are pointing to purple in this file, but because we're using the original Doom palette in our file, those same index numbers are pointing to blue, which means that we're getting a slightly different version because it's not being re-palettised. So what I'm trying to say is that anything that you're pulling out of these WADs is going to be raw data. It's not going to be re-palettised to your palette. So if you are using a custom palette, or if you're pulling from something like Neon Overdrive that uses a custom palette and you want it to run in the Doom palette, you need to extract these files and then actually re-palettise them. And so that's very easy to fix. So what we're going to do, we're going to just fix those re-palettisation problems by, we're going to grab the files. So we're looking for the Star Trek one, the sort of Egyptian dog thing, Yoda, and whatever that is. Looks like Master Blaster from Mad Max or something, or maybe a Khajiit from Skyrim, whatever. The point is we need those ones. So we go to Neon Overdrive. We want this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. So well, just to be easy, I'm just going to grab all of these ones. So from Neon Overdrive, we're going to go Graphics, Convert to, I'm just going to make it into True Color. And I'm going to go Graphics, Export as PNG. And in our DoomTools project, we're going to go Source. We're going to go Convert. And we're going to go put it straight into Texture 1. We're not going to bother making a patch. If you put things into Texture 1, DoomTools will automatically make the patch data for you. So bam, just chuck it in Texture 1. Now, because we've got auto build on, it's already recreated that texture WAD for us. So if we go into Slate and load up the texture WAD, you can now see that we have those textures added to our texture WAD, but they've been remapped to the Doom palette. So example, if we look at this Anubis looking character, you can see that it's got the purple sort of paint here instead of the blue like it originally had. But there's still going to be a little bit of a problem with seeing it inside our map, and that is because these WADs seem to override what is in our custom textures. So it's still going to be taking the raw data from here. Now, there's many ways you can get over this. The easiest way is to actually just rename your files. But because I'm using the exact same file names, what I want to do now is just delete this WAD from our resources so we're not using it anymore at all. So I'm just going to do a DoomMake clean just to clean everything up, and just do another raw DoomMake just to get everything nice and sorted exactly how we want it. Now when I load up Ultimate Doom Builder and load up our file, you can see that it's complaining that that WAD is missing, which is fine. Let's remove it. And because we're not using an alternate palette anymore, we can get rid of that palette file that we added as well. Let's open it up. You can see everything's still working as is, but you can see we actually have the purple colors because it's now taking those files from our texture WAD, not from the raw. But if you wanted to keep the Neon Overdrive WAD active so you could use other textures for it, all you need to do is rename these files like I did with the flat. And that way they're going to be importing brand new file names completely separate from anything else in the WAD. And it's not going to be any conflicts, and you'll be able to use both without removing the Neon Overdrive WAD at all. And that is basically it. There's only one more thing. In your builder, you have a file called lock. If you edit that file, it'll have agent is running true. Sometimes, just for various reasons, you'll try and do a build and it'll say, actually, you know, I've got an auto run agent is already running, because there's been some screw up and, you know, you might have closed your window or something, you know, so it didn't end properly. All you need to do is edit this and change that true to false, and then you'll be able to do builds as normal. Okay, so that's pretty much how the whole automatic build thing works. But as you might have noticed during the course of this tutorial, the automatic build tool does have a couple of disadvantages. It's really, really good for seamlessly integrating your mapping systems. As in, like, if you're just doing mapping, everything's cool. But if you're doing a lot of other stuff, like you're still screwing around with DecoHack or assets or, you know, editing textures and stuff, you often need to turn it off and do things and then turn it back on. But there is a way you can sort of embed the DoomMake commands into Ultimate Doom Builder without using the auto build commands at all. And we'll just quickly go over that because while I prefer the automatic build system, this does have some advantages in some ways. So let's have a quick look at it. Basically, here's our map file as we are going. So you go to Edit, Map Options, and down here you have Edit Pre and Post commands. So click on that. And you have two sections here, Reload Resource Commands and Test Map Commands. So let's click on Test Map Commands. We'll click in the Pre commands. We'll open up our browser and we'll go to the root of our DoomTools project, the same place that in the command line that you run DoomMake. We'll just select that folder and we'll just type in DoomMake. Okay. And hit OK. And now every time I do a test, it's going to run a DoomMake. So boom, you can see it does the build and then it does the load. I want to change something. So say I want to put another room. I want to put another texture here. So I'll click on that. I'll go to my flats and I'll add that custom flat we made. And now I do a preview without saving because I haven't added anything new to the WAD. You can see it sort of does the DoomMake, but it's almost instant because it's actually detected that there's no changes. If I change this to something else, let's go to say Zoom Text and just choose one of these nice blue checker patterns. If I do a preview now, it's still going to detect no changes because I haven't resaved the file. Okay, so I hit save. Now I've hit save, but the automatic build isn't running, so nothing's actually been built. But now if I hit play, it does the build because it detects a change and everything's working. Okay, so it's basically the same thing, just done a different way. But one of the cool things you can do with this method is that you can, especially if you're using really large projects, you can set this up to only work on resource reloading. So what I can do is I can remove this from the test map completely and I can place it into the reload resources command instead. So now if I change this to a different flat, let's go for a OTEX flat. Something very obvious. How about this skinny maggot texture or whatever it is? Now, if I do play, it's going to be blank because it's not in our release file, right? If I save it and I do a play, it's still not going to happen because it's still in the release file. But if I do an F8 to reload the map data, it does a build and then reloads all the maps. And now when I play, it'll be working. And the advantages of doing it this way is that the build command is a command that you can run at will when you want to. So it'll never run unless you press F8. I quite like it to be in both when I do it this method. So I'll go into the edit pre and post and I'll put them in both the reloading and I'll put it in the test map command. Because like I say, once you've actually, if you're not actually doing a lot of changes, the build is basically instant. You see how quick that was? And I find this really, really helpful, especially if you're editing your resource files. You just hit F8 and it will do a fresh build and everything is set up. But remember, just like before, when you do a change, you still need to save the file before you run Doom. So again, if I now hit play, it's going to show nothing because nothing's been saved. I save the file and I do a play or I do a resource reload, you can see the new files. And that, my friends, is basically it. That's all the current knowledge I have on Ultimate Doom Builder integration with textures and DoomTools. And I will see you guys next time.